Hi, ocean lovers. Welcome to episode number 8 of Dive Stories, brought to you by PADI, helping millions around the world to seek adventure and save the ocean. I'm your host, Ocean Allison, and on today's episode, I'm chatting with Nate Porter. Nate is a PADI master scuba diver trainer and captain of Expedition Drenched. During this episode, Nate shares what it's like to sail and dive around the world aboard his floating home, all about his journey pursuing a career as a dive professional, and his thoughts on the importance of seeking adventure and saving the ocean. All that and more coming right up. Thanks for being here. You're listening to Dive Stories. We bring the underwater world to you through in-depth conversations with inspiring divers from around the globe. Thanks for diving in with us as we seek adventure and save the ocean. Happy listening and happy diving. Today's Dive Stories guest is PADI master scuba diver trainer and captain of Expedition Drenched, Nate Porter. Nate, welcome to Dive Stories, and thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Allison.
Yeah, definitely. Well, on a personal note, Nate, I'm really happy to have you on the show, not only as a fellow diver, but also as a fellow sailor. And I know we've talked a little bit about this, but listeners, you may or may not know that I actually live aboard a sailboat as well. It's much smaller than the sailboat that Nate lives on, which we're going to get into a little later. But I think living on the water, no matter what the vessel, definitely creates a sort of shared bond or unspoken understanding to a certain extent. So I'm definitely looking forward to chatting diving with you as well as sailing. And we're going to start this podcast out, as we do every episode, by diving right into what we call the Dive 5. And how the Dive 5 works is at the start of each episode, I ask our guests 5 rapid fire questions about their experience as a diver and an ocean lover. So Nate, are you ready to answer the Dive 5?
I'm ready. Let's go.
Okay, great. Number 1, where is the first place you ever took a breath underwater?
Ooh, in Mexico, in a little town called Kino Bay. I was 14.
Okay, number 2, in one word, how does diving make you feel?
Oh, it makes me feel like I'm entering into another dimension where just about any crazy creature is possible to be seen down there.
Okay, awesome. Not exactly one word, but I like it. Okay, number 3, what is your favorite PADI certification course to teach?
I like teaching wreck diving.
Okay, number 4, what is your favorite ocean animal?
Sharks in general.
Okay, and then the last one, number 5, it's a big one. In one word, what does the ocean mean to you?
It's just my connection to the environment. It's my happy place.
Amazing. Well, thank you for answering the Dive 5, Nate. We're going to get a little more in depth by jumping into the core of the interview now. And I want to start out by chatting with you about your home, which is a sailboat, like I mentioned, named Sylphia. And I'd love if you could describe Sylphia to myself and listeners. You know, give us a nice visual of what she looks like, what kind of sailboat she is, and maybe even a feel for Sylphia's current surroundings.
Okay, so Sylphia is a steel ketch sailboat. She's an expedition vessel, so she is built to withstand any environment thrown at her, Arctic seas and warm water, you name it. She's 75 feet or 23 meters long, 5.5 meters or 16 feet wide, and she weighs 50 tons. So she's a deceivingly heavy boat. I think when people look at her, they don't realize just actually how big she is beneath the water, and just she's steel, so that just adds a lot of weight. She has a wheelhouse, so that means that she has a structure on top of the main deck. She's custom built in 2010. She kind of looks like a beautiful pirate ship. um, I think that a lot of people see her as maybe like a floating dive hostel. She's got bunk beds inside. We have a crew of 12 to 16 on board at times. And she's not fancy. We only have one restroom on the boat, and it's just a working boat. So there's no cabins. There's none of the glam that you might expect from like a charter boat. She's just built for adventure.
So it's just an amazing expedition vessel, like you said. So thank you for sharing, and I love the visuals that you provided as well. And so your current surroundings, like, when you're looking out the port or the windows right now, what's going on?
I've got these pretty little birds just sitting on my railing staring back at me, and I'm sitting on an island off of the Great Barrier Reef, and it's just glassy and beautiful, which is nice because it's actually been raining for about a week, and we just barely got missed by a cyclone just yesterday. So I'm pretty happy to see some sunshine today, actually.
Nice. That's amazing. I'm very glad that you dodged the storm. That's always
Yeah.
always a plus. And in addition to being the captain of this amazing sailboat, you also document and share the epic adventures that you go on above and below the surface in weekly YouTube videos on your channel called Expedition Drenched. So, Nate, in your own words, what is Expedition Drenched all about?
We kind of focus and show things from like a citizen scientist perspective. I'm not a marine biologist. We have some amazing engineers on board and videographers and just social media type people. And I think that our job, or what we like to describe ourselves, is we help bridge the gap between a lot of sustainable nonprofits that are aligned with our values. And we try to show and capture what it is they do and put it into um, layman terms for the normal viewer to really understand. And I think by doing that in video form really helps. And I think our main objective is to really just jump underwater, show the world all the beauty that is down there, and just help people fall in love with it and inspire people to want to become scuba divers and just have a better connection to the ocean in general.
Yeah, amazing. An amazing mission and amazing that you're making it happen. Now, I want to take a quick step back and chat about your personal diving journey. Before Sylphia and before Expedition Drenched. I know you've been diving for a long time now. And like I mentioned in the intro, you are a PADI Master Scuba Diver trainer. But I'm curious, when was it and what was it that initially inspired you to actually pursue a career as a professional dive instructor and to make the ocean your office?
Well, my mom was a scuba instructor, and my dad thought my mom was pretty hot, so he picked up scuba diving, and that really kind of sets the tone for me as a person in existence today, right there. It is just something that is in our blood in the family, and I started diving when I was 14, and at a certain point, I remember when I was living in Hawaii through high school, the impact that my two instructors had on me. It was just two guys living in a van and seemingly had nothing, but really to me, they had everything. They were the happiest people that I had ever come in contact with, just diving and surfing every day. And fast forward 10 years later, going through a career and normal life and having a house and a mortgage just like everybody else. I think that the lasting effect of thinking about my instructors and like that sense of freedom and their joy of just being in the ocean every day, just I couldn't go without it. So I made some big changes in my life to pursue diving as a career. Started teaching in university in Utah, which is in like the Midwest of the U.S. And from there, made the jump to Hawaii, where I really just fell in love with teaching and guiding, and that's really it for me. Once you have it, you can't turn back.
And now, as a PADI Master Scuba Diver trainer, I'm curious, for you personally, what does it mean to get to connect other human beings and currently, most often, your fellow crew members aboard Sylphia? What does it mean to get to connect them with diving, with this ability to explore the underwater world?
I mean, I've got many, many dives under my belt, and I think that I'm still amazed every time I go underwater. But to see somebody who is on their early journey, to seeing their eyes light up and start to realize just how how much of a different world is down there is so exciting to me. Just recently, I took a lot of my crew on their first dive here in Australia, and we came across this potato cod, which is probably like a 2 meter fish or 6 foot fish, enormous, bigger than some of the crew that he was swimming around. And he followed us around the whole dive, and he came right up to us. And I think when people started to realize that these fish down here aren't just swimming around aimlessly wandering, they have personalities and they have a home, and they're a lot more in depth of a creature than many give them credit for. I love seeing people connect those dots, and I think that that makes them get a better appreciation for the ocean as a whole.
Yeah, beautifully said. That's really amazing and so cool that you're able to certify all of your fellow crew members that come through. And so you're obviously a super accomplished dive instructor, and you yourself have logged more than 4,000 dives. But with the name of this podcast being Dive Stories, I ask this question to all of our guests. What is one of your most memorable dive stories that you'd like to share right now?
When I was guiding in Maui, I had a dive that I was guiding that just wasn't going right. We jumped off to do a drift dive on the backside of Molokini Crater. The current was going the wrong way, and we ended up getting pushed out into the blue, where there's just nothing to see. So now we're doing like just a drift dive through blue water, and there wasn't anything to point at this entire dive, and it just became clear that it had been botched, which it happens. And on that dive especially, I just remember so many things going through my head of like, oh man, like I failed this one. And at that moment, I had never seen a manta ray, and I had always wanted to see one. And as we were coming up for our safety stop, and this was only like a 25-minute dive, just hoping to see something. As we're coming up for it, the first manta ray I've ever seen, this enormous manta ray, comes from the depths below us, and I didn't see it at first. One of the people I was guiding, I just heard them like yelling through their regulator and pointing, and I looked down, and this manta ray literally just charged up to us and just started barrel rolling underneath us. And I just remember this sense of like, even this dive that would have or should have been just garbage, honestly, ended up being one of my most magical moments with a creature that it just swam around us for 15-20 minutes. And I just remember that amazing feeling. We all got back on the boat and everybody was just giddy about it. And it's just one of those where everything went wrong, and the ocean still provided us with a spectacular show.
Okay, ocean lovers, it's time for the dive log, the part of the show where we feature an epic dive story from one of our amazing listeners. This episode's listener dive story comes from PADI instructor Morgan Otten about an unforgettable dive that she had in Hawaii. Let's dive in.
In 2018, I was working on the Kona Aggressor, where your life is quite literally eat, sleep, dive, and repeat for months at a time. I remember having an incredibly vivid dream of swimming with a whale shark and waking up excited enough to tell the rest of the crew. I was scheduled for the first dive that day at one of my favorite sites called Paradise Pinnacle. As I jumped in and started to descend, I couldn't help notice all these light gray circles scattered around the black sand bottom. I knew that they were just little hills formed by the critters buried in the sand, but the image instantly reminded me of a whale shark pattern and the dream that I had had. I kept swimming forward, and as I approached the pinnacle, There was an actual 30-foot whale shark slowly circling, and it was just a few feet from the surface. She hung around for a few minutes, then disappeared into the blue, but I was able to capture good reference photos for the Whale Shark Research Collective in Hawaii, and since they had no record of the animal, I even got to name her. A lot of times diving can feel surreal, but I'm pretty sure that this would have actually been unbelievable if I hadn't already told people about my dream.
Thank you so much, Morgan, for sharing this extraordinary sequence of events with us. I would say that a whale shark dream coming to life the very next day definitely makes for an unforgettable dive. Listeners, if you have an epic dive story to share too, head to PADI.com/podcast to record and submit one of your most memorable dive stories for a chance to be featured in an upcoming episode. We love hearing from our global community of PADI divers, so head to PADI.com/podcast today. And now, back to this episode. So, Nate, over the last couple years, you've been living and sailing aboard Sylphia, and the Expedition Drenched crew has explored quite a bit of the South Pacific, as well as around some of Australia. Like you mentioned, you're there right now. Really, you've been getting to dive some of the most remote and beautiful places in the world, which is super impressive and amazing. So, whether you're taking the dinghy to a nearby spot or you're simply giant striding right off of Sylphia, what do you love most about being able to dive from your own back porch?
I love that you can literally wake up, have a cup of coffee and just jump right in. That's my favorite, when we can find a dive spot that we can just sit on, and we take turns, two at a time, or whoever is feeling it at that moment, just to jump in and go at your own pace, your own speed, no timeline that, you have to get back or go to a different dive spot. If you find one you love, you can make a group decision just to hang out there for a couple days. That's what I really enjoy, is just going slow with it and exploring a reef to its fullest and seeing all the different, nooks and crannies in it. To be able to take your home to famous dive spots is really cool. But I really enjoy jumping off the boat in dive spots that are not on the map and try to make them on the map. I've gotten pretty good at just looking at ocean topography and deciding where I think might be a spectacular dive. And I've surprised myself on many occasions. Also, been diving in a lot of seagrass before, just searching and exploring. But I just love the, just being able to go with the flow and really explore places that I don't think people have ever dove before. Little sea mounds in the middle of the ocean, just to see what's out there.
Yeah, that's so amazing. Thank you for sharing. And it really is amazing that you've set yourself up to dive from your own back porch and also be able to teach others to dive from your own back porch. And like you mentioned earlier, Expedition Drenched, it really operates as, sort of bridge between conservation nonprofits, as an educational resource, and an inspirational resource. And really, ocean conservation is at the heart of everything that you guys do. So I'd love if you could share some of the ways that you and the Expedition Drenched crew bring elements of sustainability and conservation into your lives aboard Sylphia, as well as, your adventures on land and below the surface, and just kind of, your life.
So right off the get-go, there's 12 of us sharing a relatively tiny space. And with that, if you compare it to, 12 of us having our own apartment, with our own vehicle, you start to realize that, the footprint is less. We get all of our power from, most of it from the sun. We do have a generator to help pump our scuba tanks, because that takes an immense amount of power. We're a vegetarian vegan boat, so there's that. We get our water from a desalinator, which just goes through all the filters. So we pull salt water right out of the ocean, and that's our drinking water. And when you live on a boat, you start to just really pay attention to power consumption because you're forced into it. And I'm sure you can imagine with 12 people, just trying to do water conservation, you're like timing people's showers. Oh, you better shower with salt water and then rinse off with fresh water. But make sure to unplug your devices. Like all of these things come into play because you're really forced into paying attention to those things, which I think is really, every time I go on land, I still think about those things. I took a couple week break recently, and it doesn't matter where you are, you plug something in, you're thinking about it. You turn the water on the tap, you start thinking, well, where does this water come from? Where is it going? And we do our best to recycle. It was really easy through the islands. I'll tell you that the islands do such a good job of, like, when you buy produce, you buy like a thing of papayas, and it comes in this beautiful woven grass basket that almost feels like it has more value than the papayas inside of it. And a lot of those islands just run off of a trade system, which we absolutely adored and loved. It's a little, and then you come to Australia or US or any first world country, and you actually start to see that we're farther behind on those things, and sometimes we go in the wrong direction with them. So it's just a matter of our purchase choices, trying to buy in bulk, trying to buy things that are not wrapped in plastic is a big one for us. And just doing our very best to minimize our footprint as a whole.
Yeah. And then, of course, I think the big one is, although obviously you use an engine at times, mostly you're traveling with the power of the wind, right?
Yeah, which is a beautiful thing. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, yeah, it's so cool to hear about all the things that you guys are doing, aboard Sylphia in terms of sustainability and conservation. And I think you're absolutely right that living aboard a sailboat in general just lends itself to a smaller footprint and to this really intense focus on energy usage and resource allocation. My husband and I definitely experience that on the daily. And, in some ways it's hard, and in other ways it's kind of this amazing opportunity. So I think it's a unique way to live, and I definitely appreciate you sharing what you guys are doing. And with 12 people, it's, I'm sure, a much bigger coordination. And over the years, you've had really awesome crew members. Like you said, you've got 12 people on board right now, from all over the world. And I think without a doubt, though, probably the cutest crew member that you've had was Peanut the sailing pig. So, Nate, lay it out for us. How did Peanut, a baby pig, come to be part of the Expedition Drenched crew? And what was it like living and sailing with the baby pig?
We were in Vanuatu on a little island called Tana Island, which is like a volcanic island. And we went and visited a village, and there's all these little pigs running around, as they are everywhere through the South Pacific. And the girls on the boat, I mean, we're all animal lovers, of course, but they were just smitten with all these little baby pigs, and one in particular, this little thing just was so tiny and friendly. And I think the villagers took note of that, and then they actually told the girls that, hey, this is actually a runt, and the other pigs aren't allowing it to eat. And they kind of gave us this little story and said, do you want to take the pig? And I don't think we actually thought that one through. I think we heard the story of a little cute baby pig not being able to eat, and that's all it took. And so, without really like having a discussion, the girls swept it up, and that's how Peanut came to be. I think we feel like we gave her the most adventurous life that a pig could ever have. And we sailed with Peanut through Vanuatu up to the Solomons, and Peanut became just the star of the show. We don't put her in the videos as much because as people do with their pets and their babies, it's just like it could take over, or you just gaga over this cute little piggy. But when we would take her to shore, everybody would take notice. We would have her on a leash at first, and then she would just follow us around. And Peanut was probably the most well-trained pig that ever was. She would give people kisses, and she would go in circles and play dead. You name it, she could do those things. And we would throw her in the water, and she would swim around villagers in canoes. And I think people just got a kick out of seeing that she was just so smart. And yeah, we just loved having her. Unfortunately, when we were in Solomon's, to be honest, COVID broke out, and we had to make some very quick decisions as to, well, the world's coming to an end. Where do we go? The answer to that was Australia, and we quickly found out that a pig is the hardest animal in the world to try to take across any borders. And so we found a beautiful Australian family that lives in the Solomon Islands. They took Peanut in as a pet. We still get updated photos from time to time. She's humongous now. And I miss Peanut a lot, and I think she really changed our project in ways that we didn't expect.
Yeah, well, it's great to hear, and I love that you were able to form such a loving relationship and bond with Peanut, and not just you, but the whole crew. And she quickly became a star on your YouTube channel, like you said, even though she's not in every video. She definitely was, amazing addition for a while. And I'm so happy to hear that she has a nice home in the Solomon Islands. So on a little bit more of a serious note, I know you just touched on COVID a bit. I think, everyone in the entire world, including those that live on sailboats, have, altered their plans due to COVID, naturally. And I want to touch on something in particular, though. With periods of isolation often sort of naturally built into life aboard a sailboat, I know you typically have your crew. Many of us living on sailboats are just, one or two people, or maybe three or four. With that, though, what advice do you have for people around the world that may be experiencing elements of isolation as a result of the ongoing pandemic? What advice do you have for them about, staying positive, staying healthy through periods of isolation?
Yeah, you definitely can feel very isolated on a sailboat. We have the benefit of having our little family, our little built-in family, but then you still feel isolated from the world as a whole, where you don't always have internet. You go off the grid for a long time and come back in, and it seems like such drastic changes are happening in the world so quickly now that you feel very disassociated and disattached from it all. Luckily, we live in the future, and you can stay connected to those you love through social media. I would say also, if you're feeling isolated, to try your best not to hone in on every news story that might be out there. And I myself, I try my best to have a moment every day where I sit and do my best to appreciate the nature around me. I do realize that might be easier for me on a sailboat than some, but I think as simple as to even just stare out your window and appreciate the snow falling or the rainstorm coming, and just having a moment of silence, enjoying that is probably good for people as well, just to feel more connected to it, to actually just enjoy it, enjoy the spectacle in front of you on a daily basis. It's a mental note that I make for myself.
So to wrap up, Nate, I want to talk a bit about living life with adventure. You are clearly an explorer and an adventurer. So whether someone's dream is like yours, to captain an expedition-style sailboat and dive all around the world, or it's something completely different, what are your thoughts on the importance of seeking adventure?
I think it's very important to always seek adventure on every turn that you can. I myself just try to say yes more often to opportunities that arise, and I think it's always good to have something planned. I know right now it's so hard to have plans and to keep plans. That's for everybody, but I still think it's good to have those dreams and to have like that small bucket list of dives you want to do and dive sites you want to go to. I've got a map on my wall of all these dive sites around the world, and it just keeps my brain positive about the possibilities out there. And I just love to explore the world. I think when this all started, I definitely said that I love sailing, but sailing for me was always just a way of getting me to my next dive site. It was like the vessel just to get me to do what I love the most, and that's scuba diving, to be honest with you. But now doing it for 2 years, I was traveling around and appreciating cultures around the world. But somewhere along the line, I realized that I could have the experience of exploring other countries right here in my own home. And that's why we've chosen to have an international crew from all over the world, people that all speak different languages and have different thoughts and mindset. And it's just so fun to explore those differences on the boat. And I never stop talking to people. It's probably my favorite part of the project now is the people I meet along the way. So whether that be crew from around the world or sailors loving to tell their sailing stories about what's around the next corner and the dive spot that's just a couple hours south of here, I love those, and it keeps my adventurous spirit alive to also help and push others as well, just to keep doing it.
Great. Well, Nate, on behalf of our global community of PADI divers and ocean lovers, thank you for sharing your sailing and diving adventures with the world, for your passion for ocean conservation, and thank you for joining us on Dive Stories. It's been so awesome chatting with you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to Dive Stories. You've just heard Nate Porter, PADI Master Scuba Diver Trainer and Captain of Expedition Drenched. To learn more about Nate and his crew of ocean-loving adventurers, make sure to check out their weekly Expedition Drenched YouTube videos and follow them on social media at Expedition Drenched. Inspired to connect with the ocean further? With PADI e-learning, you can start your next dive adventure right now from the comfort of your own home. E-learning allows you to complete the online portion first, and then connect at any time with a PADI dive center or resort to complete your in-water training. Whether you're just starting or continuing your diving journey, PADI e-learning is an ideal way to jumpstart your next underwater adventure. This has been Dive Stories, brought to you by PADI, Seek Adventure, Save the Ocean. If you love the ocean and enjoyed this podcast episode, please subscribe to Dive Stories in your podcast app and feel free to leave a review. Follow PADI on social media and head to PADI.com to join our community of torchbearers working together to seek adventure and save the ocean. I'm your host, Ocean Allison. Happy diving!